If you've ever struggled with getting enough protein while you're trying to build muscle or lose body fat on a diet, you're probably not alone. And today I'm going to share with you 5 ideas that will help you get more protein into your diet on a consistent basis to reach your physique or strength related goals. So let me give you a bit of a reference here. The current RDA is about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight in terms of the recommended dietary allowance for your daily intake. Now, to put that in perspective, take someone like myself, it's about 185 to 190 pounds. That's going to equate to about 70 grams of protein per day, which is definitely not the recommended amount for the exercising population or athletes that are trying to maintain muscle while losing body fat or build more muscle. The RDA is in place as a bare minimum recommendation to keep you from getting sick. So it's definitely not going to help you reach your physique goals, but it's probably going to keep you from getting any type of illness from a low protein intake. Now, I've already covered how much protein is probably optimal or essential for those who are trying to lose body fat and build more muscle. I will put a link to those articles in the description box, but in today's video, I want to share with you some ideas on how to actually eat more protein on a consistent basis. Now, the first idea is to simply choose leaner cuts of meat. Now, depending on what you eat on a consistent basis is going to have a huge impact on the choices you make. So if you're used to eating, say, fattier cuts of meat like ground beef, or fattier cuts of steak, or the brown meat of chicken, or you're eating fattier fish, that will have a huge impact on how much protein you're getting compared to total fat and total calories you're getting. So an easy way to increase your protein intake without increasing total calories or increasing your fat is to just choose leaner cuts of whatever meat you're eating. So one idea here is if you're used to getting 80-20 ground meat, which is essentially 80% protein, 20% fat, you can get something that's leaner, like a 90-10 cut or even a 96-4. Now I understand you may not have that in your area, but that's just an idea that you can use for getting leaner cuts of hamburger. The same goes for chicken. You can choose chicken breasts over the dark meat. You can choose leaner cuts of pork. So some pork has a lot of fat in it, and some of it is actually very lean, and you can make it even leaner by trimming off the fat whenever you prepare it. And then of course, depending on where you live, if you have access to wild game, things like pheasant or quail or deer or elk, depending on the cut of meat, you can get really, really lean cuts. For instance, when I was growing up, my dad was a hunter and he would kill antelope, and we would eat antelope for dinner. And antelope is incredibly lean. And same goes for deer as well. So if you have access to those wild game meats, it can be incredibly easy to get leaner cuts of meat on a consistent basis. Another way to get more protein in your diet is to choose lower fat or no fat dairy options. Now, if you don't have a dairy intolerance or lactose intolerance, then this is a great idea for you. I know personally, I consume a lot of dairy during the day. I tend to eat a lot of cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, I drink a lot of milk. And all of those options help me increase my protein intake, especially when I choose the skimmed versions or the lower fat versions. So on any given day, I may have 2% milk in my coffee, or I may drink skim milk with my smoothies. I also tend to make a smoothie out of cottage cheese, which is typically 2% skim milk, and then some type of fruit, whether it be bananas or orange juice, or whatever I have, maybe some berries or apples or something like that. If you look around, there are quite a few low-fat dairy options. There is kefir, there's this thing called skyr, and it's this yogurt drink that's really good. I've actually linked to skyr in one of my articles in the description box. If you have it in your area, I would suggest trying it. It's a pretty interesting drink that's high in protein and low in fat. And of course, protein powders fall in line with dairy intake because most of them are made out of whey or casein protein or a mixture of those. Chances are if you're consuming a protein powder right now, it's probably whey or some type of milk-derived protein. So this leads me to my next point. Protein powders can be extremely beneficial and useful if you're trying to increase your protein intake without increasing a bunch of calories in the process. So if you're trying to get more protein and not a bunch of carbs and not a bunch of fat, then a quality protein powder is a good idea. One thing I want you to know is that you don't have to consume protein powders. It's just there for convenience. And I would be really careful when you're selecting a protein powder because I don't trust supplement companies. Most of them are just trying to get your money, and a lot of times, and this has even been proven, you can go look at some Reddit threads and you can look at some other sources online. When they actually test the product, there's not as much protein in them as they claim on the label, and there's been many lawsuits and many people getting in trouble as a result of this. I've linked an article in the description box with some protein recommendations I have. I only recommend a few different protein powders, and I don't really recommend them for most people unless they just absolutely need them and it makes their life easier. If that's the case, then it's okay to use it every once in a while, and you can even use it daily as long as you're getting enough quality protein from other sources. And one more thing I'll say about protein powders, if you do have a dairy intolerance, some people do better on whey that's derived from goat's milk. It can be more expensive and it's harder to find, but if you do have a dairy intolerance, that can be something that could be beneficial. Now, another way to get more protein is a little unconventional, but it does help, and I've introduced this to my clients and it's been a huge hit. And that's just primarily planning your meals ahead of time. If you know that you need to hit 150 or 200 grams of protein during the day, and you're not used to eating that much protein, then you're gonna have to plan a little bit. And something I like to do is sit down and map out 3 or 4 meals that I need to have during the day, and make sure that I have good protein sources in those meals. So in the morning, when I know I'm gonna have a high protein breakfast, I always make sure I put a good amount of cottage cheese and dairy protein, sometimes some milk, whatever I need to do in order to reach my protein goals. So I may hit 50 or 60 grams of protein in the morning, and then for lunch I have 30 to 50 grams, and then post-workout I may have a shake or something like that. And then for dinner I'll make up the rest of my protein intake with some type of meat or fish. So while it may sound simple to just plan ahead of time, it can be really valuable in terms of hitting your protein intake on a consistent basis. And the last option I want to leave you with is a very simple one, but if you struggle to hit your protein intake on a consistent basis, one of the best ways to do it is just to front load your day with high protein meals. So the best way to do this, I've found, is to make sure that you have a high protein breakfast and also have a high protein lunch. So I've even hit 50% of my protein intake with my breakfast alone. Now, I don't recommend that for everyone, but if you struggle with hitting your protein on a consistent basis, and every day you look back at your log and you're realizing that you're missing out on 20 or 30 plus grams of protein, and if you think it's keeping you from your goals, this is something I would highly recommend doing, at least just for a week, and just seeing how you do with it. You also want to make sure that your first 2 meals are high in protein. So that might mean having something different for breakfast that you're not used to. It will take making some adjustments and making some changes, but I encourage you to find some foods that you really like that will allow you to get the protein intake in the morning. Some simple examples are eating some Greek yogurt or cottage cheese or something like that in the morning so you can get more of the protein than you might normally get. If you aren't a big breakfast person, making a smoothie with a couple scoops of protein powder is really beneficial. That can help you a lot. You can do the same for lunch, or you can have a variation. I will typically have some eggs and some type of meat for my lunch, depending on what my dinner is going to be. The main point here is just to make sure that you make it super easy on yourself by front loading your day with protein. So if you start out the day with 30 to 40% of your protein in that first meal, it's gonna make hitting your protein intake by the end of the day really easy in your second, third, and fourth meal. Now, I know those are just 5 simple ideas, but believe it or not, it can make hitting your protein intake way easier if you even just implement 1 or 2 of those. Now, I've covered protein intake quite a bit before in my writing, so I put those links as a reference in below this video. Thanks so much for watching. My name is JC Dean. I will see you in the next video.